The 2025 Freedom Award, everybody's getting along and has a chance to laugh about it now. It's funny what time does.
Oh my gosh, time heals. Look, everybody says this in Washington. Oh, well, it's the good old days and blah, blah. No, there's no such thing. Like this, we have a regulated means of us having a legal fist fight in the United States, right? And that is our set of politics. And that was the cage match of the founders era. Yeah. And the fights there, they continue today. And we're in the midst of it right now, talking about government funding and all these things of, the president, after the most elegant dinner you can have on the planet. Yes. with the Brits, he's tweeting about Jimmy Kimmel. So there's always politics at play, which makes this so dynamic. Yeah. And especially with the commentary we heard from Anne Marie, the best part of the commentary for people like us is at Bloomberg, because you cut through all this other stuff and get to what actually matters, what moves markets, what affects the economy. Starting with an investment in Intel. Huh?
Well, what do you make of that? I mean, there seems to be a thread here in that corporations are really trying to appease the president to an extent we haven't maybe seen in previous years. Are they doing the right thing?
Oh, well, look, this is politics at play. And look, Nvidia has a massive interest in the question of the questions only this administration can answer. Where can they export chips? That is in the say of Treasury. It is in the say of a multi-agency process called CFIUS that 25 years ago no one knew existed, and now is one of the most important national security functions. The federal government has yay or nay over where you export even basic chips, much less highly sophisticated ones like Nvidia sent. So they have a major interest in making sure they're aligned with the president and the president's wishes. That's why, one of the wealthiest men in the world and one of the most consequential people for the distribution of technology is there at a state dinner. To make sure that he is tight with this administration. Wow. It shows really the import of President 47 compared to the dynamics of President 45, where the business community was really questioning whether or not they should have connectivity. That is no longer the question. You want to have deep connectivity with this administration because it is of major consequence in a generational way.
Well, you were chairman of the Financial Services Committee. Would you be having hearings on this? That people are calling this state capitalism or worse. You're a conservative Republican. Does this align with your values? Look,
Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders wanted this for the CHIPS Act, and there was resistance, bipartisan resistance to that type of direct investment in these companies. I resist this. I think it's really not where we want the government to be long term. I don't think that's in the interest of the American taxpayer. However, the Trump administration was looking at this large pot of money that was only going to be gifted to blessed industries for the Biden regime. That was part of the CHIPS Act. And so there's really no pure way to distribute this money. But a state-based capitalism is called socialism. This is not exactly, in a very traditional economic sense, the right approach for that type of connectivity here. And also not the best way to get returns for the stockholders of these companies, and not the best way to get innovation. Certainly not here in the United States, where the free flow of capital goes to the highest and best use, and more of it goes to higher and better use over time. Politicians do an atrocious job traditionally of doing this. It was a failure in the Obama administration, was a failure in the Biden administration, and I don't think a third turn of this is going to be for the better.
Well, there is a thought out there, though, that the chip grants did help Intel especially bring out a lot of the manufacturing they had abroad stateside, and that ultimately it was helpful to get to the same goals that Donald Trump is citing as his goals, which is making chips on American soil. Why is that not still the correct strategy relative to a stake, as you say, is not the way the Americans do it?
Look, if you look at technology, we do not lack for venture money going into the toughest questions in technology. Sure. We do not lack investment capital. What we lacked is the permitting to bring these things back on shore. And permitting is still what is impairing the ability to deliver on the CHIPS Act and, frankly, the energy tax credit stuff of the Biden administration. It's impaired by the regulatory hurdles of doing big things in America, and we've not fixed that.
But making things in America is famously very, very expensive. So the more money you have to do that, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's paying the right talent, is a benefit at the end of the day. And that's what a lot of the folks are saying. The CHIPS grants afforded in a way that a lot of Trump policies aren't.
This is the rub, and this is the reason why politicians want to take our tax dollars, or actually the debt, right, the national debt, and apply it to things that are politically popular. What I would say is, if we're going to look at trade and trading arrangements, not everything should be brought onshore. We should do the highest value stuff onshore, the stuff that is most politically sensitive to national security onshore, and incentives around that. That's why you have the CHIPS dollars, right, to bring those things onshore. But let's do the harder work of litigation reform, of changing the permitting process for large and complex deals, so that we can build roads and bridges and railroads, and we can build the highest tech manufacturing on the planet here at home.
Mm-hmm. As we consider President Trump's and this administration's relationship with corporate America, that includes Howard Lutnick as well, who's been a big part of some of these arrangements, some of which you, I think, have expressed some discomfort with when we consider these investments, or the 15%, for instance, that Nvidia and AMD would provide to the government from its sales to China. Is what happened with Jimmy Kimmel any different? This idea that the president is sort of the chairman of America's board. He doesn't like this comedian who makes fun of him, and he's apparently going to be out of a job. Or is this from the same file in your view?
No, that's a very different thing.
Tell us why.
Well, if you look at Secretary Bessent and Secretary Lutnick, they do two very different things, and the president likes both of the things that they do. And so you see this operationally, where Lutnick's trying to get the best deal for the American taxpayer and believes that he's running a corporate enterprise on the president's behalf to do that, and that's how he's delivering. Meeting the president's expectations, meeting the president's goals, meeting the public objectives, doing so very, very, very well. Markets-driven guy. What you see here is the cultural clashes that have been very hot. And this has been very hot since the beginning of COVID. This is very hot since President Trump entered politics. And everything is fraught with peril when you engage in this political process. And it was Republicans who were on the losing side of that lost their jobs and lost their affiliations, not just from being political commentators. Look at Ronna McDaniel, couldn't even be a political commentator because she was blackballed by her colleagues at MSNBC. So politics has been ripe at play in politics. And when these comedians go from being comedians to politicians, there are consequences to that. And you want to enter the fray.
Been fired in your view.
Look at late night TV is exhausting to watch. It has been so unfun because they are political commentators. That is not what the American people want. It's not Johnny Carson, who separated himself from politics.
And made fun of everyone.
Made fun of everybody. But this is the difference between the two Jimmys, right? And Jimmy Kimmel was a political commentator and went into the fray.
So Fallon keeps his job? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so, because if you watch that, he's not doing politics.
Yeah.
He's doing the silly stuff that you love about late night TV that is broadly enjoyable no matter your politics, I think.
It's still free speech, though. Is that a fireable offense?
Well, I thought we're past this woke mob taking people out. I thought the cancel culture thing was like bad. But apparently it's now good because, look, who's getting fired is like whether or not cancel culture is good. I think cancel culture is really bad. I think we should have an open forum for debate. And don't watch if you don't think it's funny. I don't watch Jimmy Kimmel. I don't think he's funny. It's been very grating to watch. And I mean, if you look like me, you better have a sense of humor, right? And so I have a sense of humor about politics, but it gets exhausting when they think that they can just be on the left and get away with the rap of comedy. You better have a sense of humor.
I can't believe we just talked to Patrick McHenry for 15 minutes. We didn't ask you if the government's going to shut down.
I think so.